Hi folks, I'm Dr. Derek Wilson from Community Connections here in Princeton, West Virginia. And I want to talk to you about a subject that has got us all very concerned right now in our culture today. I know a lot of people have been talking about the virus that has become rampant, but I want to talk about another type of issue that is going rampant in our schools, in our high schools, middle schools, and starting to move into our elementary school. And I hope that parents and children are going to gather around for the next few moments, because I want to talk to you about juuling and the impact of smoking and tobacco and juuling on our lives. And I want to talk to parents and to kids. And when I'm through talking about juuling here in just a moment, I'm going to read a little story about a girl named Gracie and her friend who encountered a couple of other friends that wanted to get them to experiment. But before I do that, I'm going to talk about juuling. Juuling is a latest phenomenon. It's a little device. It's about the size of a jump drive here, flash drive. It's a pod that contains liquid. It's about like this, as you can see real close right there. That's one that was found out laying around. Here is another one that was found just laying outside the door of one of our restaurants here in town a while back. But this device has become a trending thing about being cool. Adults have used it with the idea that they were going to switch off of cigarettes because this was supposed to be less harmful than cigarettes. And the problem is that these contain so much nicotine in them that it equals as much as 20 cigarettes in one Juul pod. Some competitors, some folks have even designed them to equal up to 90 cigarettes. These things are very potent and very powerful to actually not cut back on addiction, but actually transfer addiction. In 2009, 20% of all babies born in West Virginia had drugs in their system. Depending on the hospital and the community, 40 to 60% of the babies had drugs in their system. What are you saying, Dr. Wilson? I'm saying that right now, 2019, 2020, 2021, we have the potential for a new generation of children to become genetically inclined or have a gene in their system that could get hooked on drugs and substance use later in life. 95% of all people that have substance use disorder started out smoking. And juuling is now a new phenomenon that many of our high school, middle school kids are experimenting with. And I have been talking to elementary school kids before the schools were shut down. I've been in many elementary schools, and the elementary students were telling me that they knew people in their school that had tried it or was using it. And I would take a poll, and on the average, 15 to 20% of every one of the 4th and 5th graders that I talked to had said that their parent had allowed them to experiment with a Juul pod. You see, what happens is secondhand smoke and the experimenting with the juuling will actually flare up and kick in a genetic disposition towards addiction. That's how so many kids start out in middle school experimenting, and then later on they're hooked on cigarettes and now hooked on juuling, and they grow up to get hooked on harder substances. What are some of the symptoms of a person who's having some damaging effects of the juuling? Nicotine addiction, nosebleeds, acne, increased thirst, shortness of breath, pneumonia, coughing. And you see the virus that is rampant right now actually affects those that smoke and juul faster than those who don't. That's already some stats that are coming in, that those who use that have genetic weaknesses, physical, leaning towards having some physical problems. The brains aren't fully developed. And kids and middle school students and teenagers. So it becomes easier for them to get hooked on these substances, easier to get hooked on nicotine, because nicotine is a drug. Nicotine is not just a harmless habit or a dangerous habit. Nicotine is a type of drug that changes the way the brain functions, changes how the brain operates. And when I go into the schools to talk to the kids, they're very open and very honest about what's going on around them. And I know sometimes that parents have gotten hold of these and don't think it's a big deal and land it around the house. But kids experiment. They want to do what parents do. And so they'll pick it up and they'll try it to see what it's like. The danger part of it is that secondhand smoking, cigarette smoking for sure. Still the studies are looking at secondhand juuling smoke on how it affects addiction. But for sure secondhand smoking does fuel addiction in kids. It fuels addiction in middle school students and teenagers because of the way the brains are developed. So what kind of advice would I have to give to kids? It's a little cliche that I've started saying in the schools, and it just simply says, be smart, don't start. Say that with me. Be smart, don't start. Let me share with you a little story. This is Gracie's guide to saying no to smoking and to tobacco and nicotine products. And it's a cute little story. It's part of our elementary SAD curriculum, Students Against Destructive Decisions. And these books are being shared in our school system. And the author is right here from Princeton, West Virginia. And these books have won many awards already. And I wanted to just share a little story about what Gracie encountered one day when her and her friends were going on a field trip. Gracie heard the pitter-patter of rain as she hurried to get ready. It was going to be an awesome, wonderful, fantastic, super perfect day in spite of the rain. Excitement filled as she thought about the trip to the water park. It was her favorite place to go, and who cared about the rain when they were going to get wet anyway? She threw a change of clothes into her backpack and was out the door just in time to catch the bus. And Kenzie, her BFF, you know what BFF is? Yeah, that's it. BFF had their seats saved as they started off on their 5th grade field trip. As they traveled out of town, the rain clouds disappeared, and it looked like it might be a pretty day after all. But the rain was nothing compared to the storm that the two girls were going to face that day. Kenzie pulled out a bag of chips out of her snack pack, and 2 of them munched away as they traveled down the road. They were yakking about nothing important when suddenly Leah Buxton, who was sitting in front of them, leaned around to show them something in her hand. And she says, "Hey, look what I snatched from my mom," Leah began. "We're going to have some fun today." She showed the 2 girls a pack of cigarettes and a jewel pod. The girls' mouths dropped open and their eyes became as big as lollipops. They had never been offered anything like that before, and they were absolutely speechless. Leah laughed at them and said, "Don't be surprised. We can sneak off somewhere today and no one will ever know." She turned around and the 2 girls stayed frozen in their seat for what seemed forever. They didn't know what to say. Leah turned around again and said, "And don't you act like you don't want to. Don't be a baby. Don't be a baby." For the first time in their lives, Gracie and Kenzie didn't know what to do. They knew that smoking and vaping was bad, but they didn't want to be called babies by the cool kids. Within a few minutes of excitement, replaced with a feeling of dread. The 2 of them sat there dreading to get off the bus. This super perfect day had become a super horrible day. They didn't even want the bus ride to end. Gracie began to think of ways she could avoid Leah. Her mind was working overtime as she plotted out some pretty cool plans. "I've got it," Gracie whispered. "We can tell Leah that we're allergic to the smoke and the vaping." What? Kinsey exclaimed. She will never believe that. But people are allergic to all types of things. I mean, there are 6 kids in our class that has a special diet all because of allergies. Kinsey thought about it for a minute, and it was true that there were a lot of people with allergies. Maybe she would believe it. Okay, but you got to tell her, Kinsey muttered. Gracie sat up in her seat and stretched up to Leah. Hey, Kinsey, I can't smoke and vape because we're allergic to them. Leah laughed out loud. She told Andrea, her friend sitting by her, and the two of them couldn't stop laughing and making fun of them. I told you, Kinsey said as she and Gracie sank into her seat. When the laughter died down, Leah popped their heads up over the top of the seat and said in unison, babies, babies. Gracie didn't know what to do. She knew that they had to come up with another plan, and she was really good at finding clues and solving mysteries, and she was a super spy at looking into things, but she just really didn't know how to handle this. And Kinsey looks at her and says, okay, what's plan B? Gracie shrugged and said, the one thing you got to know about super spies is that there's always something rolling around in their mind, and plan B was in the making. And finally she replied, got it. When we get off the bus, we're just going to avoid being around them all day long. Kinsey looked at her and said, that's plan B? Gracie looks at her and says, you got a better idea? No, but that will never work. This park is way too big. And Gracie stammered and said, that's all I got. The day did not get any better for the girls. It seemed that everywhere they went, Leah and Andrea were there. There was no way to stay away. During lunch, Leah came up to Gracie and said, now, let's go. Gracie looked at Kinsey and they stayed perfectly still. Leah nudged Gracie and said, come on, baby. It's now or never. I just told our chaperones we're going to the bathroom. Come on. Even though they didn't want to go, Leah had pressured them into getting up and following her. As they walked out of the eating area, Gracie started going over in her mind all the things that she had been taught about peer pressure. What's right is not always popular, and what is popular is not always right. And it takes nothing to join the crowd. It takes everything to stand alone. Even if everyone is doing it, wrong is never right. And with every step, Gracie felt a little stronger. Then her mind began to go over the dangers of smoking and vaping. She remembers a saying that says, you're a fool if you think smoking and vaping is cool. Once you start, it's hard to stop, and be smart, don't start. And the slogan that rang through her mind the loudest was just say no. And with that, Gracie stood still. Everyone turned around and asked her, says, what's up? But it didn't take a super spy to see the determination in her eyes. She looked at Leah and Andrea, did not even blink an eye. She proclaimed, I'm not going to try a cigarette, and I'm not going to try a Juul pod. I'm not going to do what I know is wrong. Leah rolled her eyes and said, you got to be kidding. No, I'm not, Gracie said, as the group stopped in their tracks. Well, I knew you wouldn't be brave enough. I knew you'd wimp out on us. Leah took a step closer to Gracie, and at this point they were face to face, nose to nose. It wasn't easy to stand up for what she thought was right, but deep inside, Gracie knew that it was the right thing to do. Well, I'm not being a wimp. A wimp would do it just because everybody else is. I'm being strong by saying no, Gracie proclaimed. Well, Andrea and I are going to do it, and all the babies can go back, Leah snapped. We're not babies. We are standing up for what is right. Gracie stated, I wish you could think about what you're doing. It's not a good thing. And with that, she and Kinsey turned around and rejoined the group, and they were just in time for triple scooped ice cream cones. That sounds good, don't it? It's good ice cream. Leah never dreamed someone could stand up to her and be so brave. It was beyond comprehension, but she kept going and didn't notice that her teacher, Mrs. T, was standing nearby. She caught the girls as soon as they lit the cigarette and popped the top off of the pod. They were in big trouble for sure. The rest of the day was pure fun for Gracie and Kenzie, and they splashed and they swam and they swam and they splashed and no longer had to dread seeing anyone. Instead, they just soaked up the sun. And on the way home, Gracie felt bad for Leah and Andrea. Mrs. T had called their parents and they were in trouble at home as well as at school. They should have listened and not done something so crazy. She hoped they had learned their lesson. When Gracie stepped off the bus at her house that afternoon, she felt like she was 10 feet tall. It was a good feeling to know she had taken a stand against something she knew was wrong. She ran inside and told her mom all about it. Her mom was super proud of Gracie for being strong at a time would have been easy to give in. You know, Gracie, there will be many more times when other people will tempt you to do something wrong. Her mom began. You're going to be offered other things, like maybe alcohol or other drugs. Maybe even a time when all your friends are drinking and vaping. You have to remember that often all it takes is one time to try something before you're hooked. Please be strong and stand firm against destructive decisions. And Gracie listened to her mom and decided that nothing in the world was worth risking being a person addicted to vaping, to smoking, to drugs. She was going to do the right thing and take a stand against destructive decisions. It didn't take a super spy to figure that out. The conclusion of that story was Gracie and her friend had a good time, and the friends that were trying to get her in trouble got into some trouble and learned a valuable lesson. So I want to encourage you today to remember this little saying: be smart, don't start. And stand up and do what is right, and know that this right here, the juuling, vaping, cigarettes, nicotine, are all harmful and damaging to your body. It's not something to play with and experiment with. So be smart, don't start. Thank you for watching. If you have any questions or would like to know about any other materials that we have at Community Connections, and we have different subjects on addiction, suicide, we have on cyber safety, we've got relating to police officers, firemen. We've got a whole set of books at Community Connections on the Gracie's Guides. Call us at Community Connections and we can help you. Thank you for tuning in.